Hello everybody, welcome back to another DC miniature game battle report. It's time for another table reshuffle, so that's when we call in the DC people and they just have a fun time chucking buildings at each other, and then something new grows from the ashes. So it's 50 levels of heroes and villains, low model counts on both sides, so this might end up being just a relatively quick one just based on not having many models to activate. We're going back to one of the previously played scenarios because a lot of the next scenarios in line are thematic and the models aren't available for them, like Brainiac, Supergirl, things that I think existed in like the first version of the DC miniature game but haven't been re-released. So anyway, let's go over the teams that are going to be playing and wrecking this for us today. So the hero side is the Henry Cavill Superman, the Ben Affleck Batman with the Kryptonite Grenade Launcher, which is going to be very important in this battle report, and then the new released Steel plus Superboy. Come as a double pack. Steel isn't actually a Kryptonian, he just kind of, he's got hero worship for Superman. Superboy is, I think he's like the clone of Superman in Lex Luthor. He doesn't have, like, he doesn't draw power from the Earth's sun. He has like telekinetic powers. On that subject, he does have a, I think it's an emission, also apologies for sniffing, got the code still on his card that I just want to point out. In his skills he's got the standard Kryptonian resistance 2 to physical and energy. But the way his powers work is you spend power on buffs for his activations. You can't take the same one twice, but you can like give him Kryptonian level strength, you can make him fly, but it also says give him resistance 2. It doesn't say +2 resistance, it says give him the roll. So the way we're going to play it is that it's incorrectly put in his skill list because he has to buy the power for himself. That's how we're playing it. It's open to debate obviously, but that's the way we're doing it, just so we're clear. So with that, let's go take a look at the villains. So there's only 3 miniatures in the villain team. General Zod, Namek, I think his name is actually Namek, it's the planet from Dragon Ball Z, and Fiora, the 3 villains from Man of Steel. Well, obviously the General Zod and his followers have been villains before, but these are based on the Henry Cavill versions of those characters. Altogether they come to the 50 power level. That's because they're all Kryptonian, so they're all powerful. Only General Zod can fly, the other 2 have Wonder Woman-esque super jumps, but they're all powerful. They're all weak to kryptonite though, so that means Batman might have a chance to shine. Let's go take a look at the scenario we're playing. So we are going back, all the way back, to scenario 1, the artifacts. So there's 3 artifacts on the table, positioned thusly. Instead of these corners, just because of the way the table's laid out, we're going to use these corners and like twist the artifacts to compensate. You control an artifact if you have the most characters within 4 inches of it at the end of a battle round. 1 victory point for each held in this manner. 1 bonus victory point to whoever, sorry I'm not even showing it, to whomever has the majority at the end of each battle round, and 1 victory point for each enemy model incapacitated. So we'll get this set up. Again, we're twisting the table 90 degrees, but it'll be set up and then we'll show where the models are starting. So we've got the board set up. Here is the first artifact, here is the second artifact, and there is the third artifact over there. It's just 6 by 6 and then diagonal line for deployment, so there's not enough room to really do anything fancy. So the heroes are just in a line, they have their powers banked for their first activations about round 1. And then all the way over here in the other corner, there's General Zod with his power, and then Fiora and Namek as well, just waiting to go ahead. So all that remains to be seen is who is going first in the first battle round. Also, General Zod does have the ability to activate a character within a certain distance of him to get 2 activations in a row. He also has, I think it's Mastermind or Strategist, the role that gives you an extra pass as well if you want, and he already has 1 pass. In Battle Round 1, it will be the heroes going first. Blue for heroes, red for villains. So Steel activated first for the heroes. I must admit I don't know much about Steel. I know he's just like some engineer worker that got saved by Superman, and then after Superman gets killed by Doomsday, kind of takes up the mantle, and he's kind of just wearing an iron suit. I don't know why he can fly. Why is he able to fly? Either way, he spent 3 to fly where you put him, and then he has a passive role called the Engineer, which lets him do a bunch of stuff. One of which is a scenery element within 2 inches of him, up to size 4, can be moved 4 inches. So he opted to bring the car with him in case Superman wants to chuck it at someone. So he's going to bring ammunition with him. He's strength 3, so he can't actually, well actually if that car counts as strength 3, I don't remember now. I need to check the clarifications because we've been playing Marvel and the size clarifications for scenery are different. The buildings are definitely 4 or 5. The cars could be 3. If it's 3, then he can actually chuck that at someone, so he's bringing ammunition with him. He banked the rest of his power, he can't do another move action, so he is just sitting there waiting. General Zod activated first for the villains, and as you can see, he does not mess around. He spent 3 power to fly next to the building here, 3 power to pick it up, and he chucked it at steel. So the building was 6 damage points, 2 trees got destroyed for 1 each. The scenery that was on top got destroyed just from falling down, the artifact obviously doesn't. This car absorbed 1 of the hits, so it's got 2 structure points left. So that meant 3 damage was heading Steel's way, however he passed his agility roll, so there was no damage done there, and now he's out of range to do anything else. Forgot to mention at the top though, but Zod and his followers have a passive called Martial Prowess, I think? What is it called? Martial Pride, which is actually super powerful. They get to decide whether to pay the power cost to overload an attack after they do the hit roll. In other words, they can roll and hit and be like, oh, I made the hit, I'll spend the power to do 1 extra damage, or 3 extra damage on super punches. Or roll, oh, I didn't get it, I'll pay the power cost now to guarantee it. That is really, really potent. But either way, there's nothing else he can do now, so he has banked 4 power. Superman activated, he spent 3 power to fly over here, he then spent 3 power to chuck the Batmobile, because that's totally something the Henry Cavill Superman would do. He chucked the Batmobile at Zod with nothing in the way. Zod passed his agility roll and took no damage. So from where he was, he shot a heat ray, or his eye lasers, his heat, what is it officially called? I keep forgetting. Heat vision, yeah, heat vision. He fired his heat vision for 2 power. He has a rule called energy, which means the first attack he makes every turn he can actually spend and do 2 overload abilities. So in other words, he can buy the extra dice to try and land the hit, and if it has an additional effect on overload, which heat vision does, it gets penetrate and +1 damage, I think. You can pay for that as well. So he used all his power by doing that, because that's a total cost of 2 +1 for both overload effects. Fired at Zod. Zod buffed his energy defense with 1 of his power and did not get hit by it. Didn't get through his defense. So Superman's out there with no power left over, and it is back over to the villains. Feora activated next for the villains, and she super jumped from behind the truck there, which got moved slightly by accident, over to where you can see her, just because that's more effective for range covering, because essentially it's fly, but it's not quite as good as fly, hence why she's not up as much as Zod is. And there's nothing else for her to do, so she's just banking her power. She has a once per game, which like mimics the scene from the movie where she nothing personnel's 4 soldiers at once, so she can do like 4 quick base moves, but it would be a waste to try and attack Superman with that. So not doing that, and it's back over to the heroes. Superboy activated, and as previously discussed, he can spend power during his activation to give himself certain buffs. He buffed to give himself the ability to fly this turn, and then spent 3 to move. Where you can see him. Given that there's nothing in range for him and nothing is going to get in range to hurt him, there was no point buffing his defense or his strength or his damage, so he's just banking 6 power. The next turn though, when we get into Battle Round 2, that is going to be very messy and explodey. So just to quickly cover the last 2 activations of Battle Round 1, Namek also super jumped and just banked the rest of his power because everyone was out of range. I like the idea of Zod just flying in and then these 2 super leaping into the ground behind. And then Batman finished his turn. This Batman's Batclaw is a once per game, not a once per turn, so he moves very slowly, so he just spent 2 to move 7 up. It's probably best he's at the back though, because he wants to just fire kryptonite grenades at any target really, including that one. Anyway, that's it for Battle Round 1, we'll be back for the recap. So at the end of Battle Round 1 there wasn't much to talk about thanks to the scenery that was thrown not being very effective. There is no one within 4 inches of any of the artifacts, so there's no points scored for holding them, there's no points scored for majority, and nobody was incapacitated, so it's all even on 0 as we move into Battle Round 2, so it's more likely to be Zod and Associates going first this time, but we'll see. It's not impossible for it to be the heroes, but oh, it is actually going to be the heroes going again first in Battle Round 2. So to get Battle Round 2 started, Superboy activated and he spent 3 power on buffs, +2 strength, or +3 strength, which gives him basically superhuman strength for throwing things. He gave himself resistance +2 to physical and energy, and then finally gave himself +1 damage to attacks. He then spent 2 just to move small, because he didn't give himself, or move his medium range, because he didn't give himself the ability to fly to the far side. Then he spent 3 to chuck the already slightly damaged car that only had 2 structure points left at Zod. Zod failed his agility roll and took 2 damage. Sadly, he's having to bank 4 power because he has a ranged attack. It isn't heat vision, it's a telekinetic blast, but it's a cone, and Zod is slightly out of range. He's also not in range to be claiming the artifact down here. So he's banking 4 power. He did deal damage, bloodied Zod's nose a little bit, but now let's see what he does in retaliation. Namek activated and he super leapt from where he was to smash down right in front of Superboy over here. He then attacked with a super punch for 2 or 3, I've forgotten now. Super punch is, everybody has it on this battle, in this battle, 3 base. He rolled, wasn't going to get through his physical defense, which was also buffed via spending 1 power. So he overloaded, spent another power because of martial pride. He chooses to do it after the fact. Rolled the additional dice and still did not pierce the defense. So Superboy was unhurt by the attack. He banked 1 power, nothing else he can do. Well, actually, there is one thing he can do, but it's a reactive. If Zod or Fiora get attacked while within 6 of him, he can spend 1 power to take the hit instead, because he's kind of like a tanky bodyguard. So if Zod goes over there, he will be able to get some benefit out of that 1 power. For now, though, it is back to the heroes. Steel activated and he flew over to be within the 4 inches required to be claiming that artifact. He then overloaded a hammer throw and chucked it at Namek. It got through his physical defense for 2 damage, which isn't too shabby, I suppose, to get things started. So it's over to either Zod or Fiora now, and then we've still got Superman and Batman over there for the heroes. Fiora activated and super jumped down here to be within 4 of this artifact. She then overloaded, after the initial hit roll failed, overloaded heat vision on Superman. Superman did spend 1 power to buff his energy defense just in case. It did not get through and did no damage, so she is now banking 3 power. Batman activated for the heroes, and first he spent 2 to wander around the corner of the triple X bar here. He then fired an overloaded shot from his kryptonite grenade launcher, which is mystic damage, or whatever, the one that you can't take a defensive stance against, that makes Shazam so good because all his attacks are that element. Black Adam as well. Anyway, shot it at Fiora. It normally does 2 damage, however it's kryptonite grenades, and she is obviously weak to kryptonite because she's a Kryptonian, so it doubles the damage for 4 damage, so that bloodied her nose a little bit. And now it's only Zod, although he could... No, he can't pass because every other heroes went as well. Zod has to activate now. Sorry, not every other hero is activated. We've still got Superman, a sort of hero. So Zod technically could pass if he wanted Superman to take his turn first. We'll see if that happens. So General Zod did activate. He didn't need to fly, so he just spent 2 to move his second movement distance to where you can see him within the central artifact, obviously. He stood where he did because he wanted to try and do a heat vision that hit automatically without having to overload to get the extra dice, because if he overloads after just to get the additional effect, it has pierce, so it would pierce through and also hit Batman. He rolled okay, but Superman already had boosted energy defense, and he required an overload to just try and make the hit land. The additional dice was a 1, so it didn't get through, and all the rest of his attacks are close range, so he had to bank 5 power. That does mean Superman basically has to go after Zod though, because otherwise the central artifact is claimed by the villains. So we'll be back after Superman's turn to end battle round 2. So to end off the turn, Superman spent 1 just to move 4 inches into base to base with Zod, spent 3 to attempt a grab and chuck, but Zod evaded his grasp. So with the 5 power he had left over, he overloaded a super punch, and remember he has energy so he can get both effects of an overload, so the extra dice plus the plus 3 damage. So it didn't just do 3 damage, it did 6. Zod's pretty tanky though, so he's still in his healthy part of his HP, but obviously he is hurting now. And that takes us to the recap for the points and whatnot for Battle Round 2. So as we see of the second round, there's no knockout checks, there's no wake-ups or anything like that, so it just comes into victory points. This artifact down here is held by Steel, so that's 1 victory point to the heroes. This middle one is contested, so no victory point, and this one is held by Fiora barely for 1 victory point to the villains. Nobody has a majority, so it's just 1 victory point each, and no incapacitations either for victory points there. So it's just down to seeing who goes first in Battle Round 3. It is much more likely to be the villains. I don't believe it. It's not. It's the heroes. That means the next 3 turns are all the villains going first. So perhaps unsurprisingly, Superman was first activated for the heroes. He spent a staggering 6 power, that's 5, plus overloading his once per game super attack, and he actually did not get through Zod's physical defense. He spent a power to buff it as well. So instead he resorted to spending 3 of his remaining 4 power on trying to throw him again. This time the hit did get through. He chucked Zod into this police car, or police towing thing. It absorbed a couple of damage because it's the size of the thing being thrown, and Zod is size 2. So it's the user's strength -1 damage, so Zod took 5 damage and is knocked down. He is in his pale section of his health bar, so he'll be doing a knockout check at the end of the turn, if he doesn't go lower than that sooner. Over to the villains. It was time for Neo before Zod. He recovered and spent a power to stand up. He then spent 3 to chuck the damaged vehicle he was next to at Superman. It hit him. It only had 3 structure points left, so it did the 3 damage because there was nothing else in range. He then spent 1 to move 1, and then from where he was standing, he overloaded a heat vision and managed to land it on Superman for an additional 2 damage. So Superman took 5 damage in total. He's knocked down from when the car smacked him in the face. So Zod did okay. He couldn't do his once per game attack from that distance, so he still has that if he stays standing. Back over to the heroes. Steel activated and stayed still for his activation. He did 2 overloaded hammer throws at Namek, who opted not to buff his defense. 1 managed to get through for a simple 2 damage, nothing fancy. He is, I think he's 3 HP away from going down to his pale zone at this point. Fiora activated and she had a pretty awesome turn. She used her once per game fast combat action for 2, and the way this works is she gets 3 movements for her base movement, which is 6 inches, and she's allowed to stop after each one and attack before carrying on with the next. So she moved, and then that got her in range point blank with Batman, who you'll notice is no longer there. She did her once per game super punch, and it got through his defense. Plus it was a crit, which is the rule most forgotten when playing this game, that if 2 of the attack dice match and get through, it's +1 damage. So it normally does 5, but it did 6 damage and shoved Batman back. She then shot a laser with her leftover power, and that got through for an additional 2 damage. So Batman took 8 in total. He spent 1 power to buff his physical defense, didn't for the energy defense. She then moved her final 6-inch move into the middle to give them majority over the central objective. Oh, forgot to mention, but that does put Batman straight from full health into the latter half of his pale zone, so he is hurting. And just also to be clear, it specifically says that when she's doing that fast movement, you can do attack actions between each of the free moves that you've paid 2 for in total. It's not attack, so she was allowed to do 2 and then move, just to be clear. Batman is not playing around. He moved up, he fired his kryptonite grenade launcher at Zod, it got a crit, and did 5 damage to him, putting him on 1 HP. However, he passed his stamina roll, so he did not pass out. It's also explosive 3, however, so Superman and Fiora both got caught. Superman did not dodge it, because he's knocked over as well. So he took 2, doubled because he's weak to kryptonite as well, for 4. Actually, that's the thing, would the crit apply to the explosion people as well? Don't actually know. We'll carry on as is, so the crit only affected the initial target, not the explosion people. Fiora did pass her agility roll, so the damage gets halved, so 2 becomes 1, but then because she's weak to kryptonite, it goes back up to 2. So Ben Affleck Batman has no cares for Kryptonians, so he can only be happy with how that went. And now it's over to Namek to end the villain turn. Namek went next for the villains, and he had an exceptionally effective turn. He started in base to base with Superboy. He spent 4 power to do the overloaded throw attempt, just to try and guarantee it. It succeeded. He got chucked over here into a wall. The wall got shattered by the impact of him, and he took 5 damage because it's strength -1, and all these people are strength 6. Actually, that's not true. Fiora is strength 5. But Zod and Namek are strength 6. So 5 damage there. He then spent 1 to move next to Steel in range of this artifact, and spent his last 3 power, so he couldn't overload it, to attempt to chuck Steel, and he succeeded. He threw Steel over here into the building for 5 damage as well. That was a super effective turn. So now it's just Superboy, who didn't spend any power in defense, so he's got a full turn to go to end the turn. So Superboy activated. He moved with, I think it was just 1 he needed, or maybe it was 2, but no fly. So he just moved next to here. He spent power to give himself +2 strength, which puts him at strength 5. He spent another 1 to get +1 to his damage, which actually totally forgot to take into consideration, so let me just do that. He then spent 4 on an overloaded throw attempt. He grabbed Namek and chucked him into the telephone booth. So he would have been strength 5, which goes down to 4 for the damage, plus the knockdown, but totally forgot he spent 1 of his telekinetic points on +1 damage, and the rulebook does specify that throws count as attacks, which is why you're allowed to overload them. So that would apply the +1 damage. So that's 5 damage to Namek. He is now into his pale zone, and that takes us to the end of Battle Round 3. So at the recovery and recap phase for the halfway point, both teams own one of the artifacts. Superboy is claiming this one, Zod and Fiora are claiming the middle one, no one is claiming that one over there, so that's 1 point each, no one has the majority and nobody has been removed from the table, so it's all square. However, Batman failed his stamina roll for being in his pale zone, so he is knocked out, he's succumbed to his wounds. Namek also succumbed, whatever, to his wounds, so he is passed out, and Zod was fine. So, as we start with next turn, Batman, Namek knocked out, they have a chance to get a turn, but not guaranteed, and then it's at -2 power, -1 just for waking up, then -1 to stand up. Steel is knocked down, but conscious, as is Superman, so they both will have to spend a power to stand up, and we know for a fact that for the final 3 turns, if it goes the full distance, the villains are getting first activation in every turn, because they got very unlucky at the start of the game with draws. So, there it is, Battle Round 4 starts with the villains. General Zod went all out to start Battle Round 4. He just moved up a little bit. He's in his pale zone and he actually loses the ability to fly in this zone. Not that it mattered, but just an interesting thing to note. He then spent 4 to chuck Superman. He easily did it with Superman being knocked down. Smacked him into the triple X bar for 5 damage. That puts Superman in his pale zone and is close to going into his blue zone. He then fired 2 heat vision blasts at Batman, and despite him being knocked out, they didn't get through. The first roll was a 2 and a 1, the second roll was a 2 and a 4, which was kind of pathetic. But he badly hurt Superman and he's still claiming that middle objective with Fiora. So on to the heroes. Superman activated, spent 2 to move where you can see him. He then did his once per game freeze breath for 4 overloaded, I believe it was. So it would hit Zod and Fiora. It's an automatic hit, but they do an agility roll, and if they pass it, they take half damage. Zod passed his, but half damage, it does 2 damage normally, it does 1. 1 was enough to kill him, so that is General Zod defeated for 1 victory point at the end of the round. Fiora did not pass her agility roll, so she took the full 2, she was pushed back an inch, and also has stun 1, so she had 1 power sapped from her. So Superman gave as good as he got, he defeated Zod. Doesn't necessarily mean the battle was in the hero's favour, as we go back over to the villains. Fiora activated, spent 1 to move into base to base with Superman, spent 6 to try and do her once per game super attack, and it failed, which did not leave her enough to attempt a throw, so she just attempted a normal push, I think it was, or no, sorry, heat vision for 2, but it didn't get through either, which left her with nothing to do, and Superman's still very much alive. She banked 1 power for defense, but that's it. Steel activated and did his once per game Earthshaker on the unconscious Namek. It got through, so it did the full 4 damage. Now, interestingly, there's a thing, it has like stun 3 on it or something, and also like explosion 5, but the stun is the important part. Namek has an attempt to get an activation this turn. Do you retroactively apply the stun once you find out whether he has an activation? We're going to play it that you don't, but not 100% sure on that. So either way, he had 1 power left, which he spent to move where you see him. He is not close enough to help claim the objective though. Namek successfully woke up, but he was a little low on power. Also, just a thing that happened off camera afterwards, forgot about Steel's ability to move a scenery piece within 4 inches, so he moved the car to both block slightly and also to put it in range for Superboy to chuck it. As it stands though, Namek instead decided to spend 3 of his 5 power he had, thanks to also being in his pale zone now, over here to give majority control here. He then, with the remaining 2, just tried to death beam Superman and rolled badly. So now it's down to Superboy's turn and Batman's to end Battle Round 4. Batman successfully woke up, obviously -1 power, then -1 to stand up. He moved 1 to where you can see him, then he did his once per game, I think, combo strike, power strike, what is it called? Power strike. Overloaded it for 5 power, that's all we had left on Fiora. He did it, he got through her defense for 4 damage, which put her in her blue zone. She failed her instant stamina roll that you have to take, so she fell unconscious. And with that, pardon me, with that, the villain side is conceding because they're in an untenable situation. Superboy is going to stand over there in this turn to claim that. They've lost the... Well, actually I don't remember if KO models count as contesting objectives. I don't think they do, so therefore they've lost this one as well. They've also lost majority and they've lost Zod, so they can't come back. So, we'll be back with the final recap. So there's nothing in the knocked out bit that says you can't contest objectives, and the scenario just says models within 4 inches of an objective. It doesn't say knocked out, healthy or otherwise. So the way the things stand at the end of what's going to be the end of the game, The heroes hold this one for 1. This one is contested, so nobody holds it for 0. Zod got taken out for 1. That no one holds it for 0, and the heroes have the majority because they have 1 claimed for another 1. So that's how we're running it, and that means that the final score is, it's fairly low scoring, but it's 5 victory points to the heroes and 2 to the villains. It started off very strongly for the heroes, and then the villains just had that one excellent turn. I think if it wasn't for Batman's grenade launcher doing so much damage to Zod and Fiora, it might have been a little bit different. Steel is interesting. Being able to shift sceneries next to 4 inches, as long as it's not too big, to kind of set up. It's like he's setting up balls for other teammates to hit. It would have been nice if it played on just to see Superboy then chuck the car and etc. If we had played on, Namek's got 4 HP left, his stats are diminished, he's lost power. If Fiora woke up, she's in her blue zone as well, so she's got -1 power, -1 stamina, -1 to all defenses, plus she'd start knocked down. So there was no reason to play on. It was fun destroying a table as always though, and I wouldn't say Zod and his lieutenants make an effective force in a game where it's not just about killing. If it was, they could all just hang around together and annihilate. So, yeah, but taking Zod with other characters might work out better. I think is he 18 power level? Yeah, he's 18, which is exactly the same as Superman, so you can build a list around him, I think. But anyway, this was just for fun, destroying the table, trying out Steel and Superboy. Superboy didn't really get to see much, but he is powerful, surprisingly. And Steel is interesting, if nothing else. So thank you very much for watching this battle report. I hope you enjoyed. Please do go check out the other DC reports we have, the Batman ones, and Marvel now as well, and 40k. And we shall see you in the future. Remember to subscribe as well if you want to see videos as soon as they go live. And until next time, ta for now.